This is your Friday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. A lot of stuff going on, but we're going to change the format a little bit of the show today. Usually have a little talk, have a little, main thing we're talking about in the beginning, get to a bunch of different subjects, but today we're going to lead off with a conversation I had earlier this week with Bud Grant. It is his 95th birthday today. The legendary Vikings head coach, Hall of Famer, sat down with me over the phone earlier this week for a nice conversation about life, about football, about days well spent. And this being his 95th birthday, I feel like Bud has earned the position to be at the front of the show, not in the middle of the back. So we are going to get to that right now. Very happy to have legendary Minnesota Vikings head coach Bud Grant on Daily Delivery today. 95 years ago, Bud, it all started. You were born May 20th, 1927, Superior, Wisconsin. That means you on Friday turned 95 years old. How does that feel? How are you doing today?
Well, it's kind of interesting. Aging is an interesting progression, and particularly if you live to be as long as I have. So you've gone through adolescence, and I went in the service and had a job, had a family, got married, retired, and grandchildren. I mean, that's a whole progression of time frames that you go through. And now I'm in the last phase of that, lifetime, and it's been enjoyable. I can't complain about anything, and I'm retired. I'm still cognitive, so I can talk to you, and I can, interact with my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So life has been wonderful.
How many grandchildren and great-grandchildren are we up to now? I imagine it's quite a few.
Well, I've got 13 grandchildren, 18 great-grandchildren.
That's amazing. That's great.
They all live within maybe 3 miles from here.
That's great. That's
they're not living in California and Washington and Maine, or they're all right here.
You managed to keep them close to home. Well, that's great.
It's a tribute to their grandmother or my wife. They all want to stay closer to their mother, so they brought their spouses here rather than going somewhere else. So that was a tribute to her.
Could you have, when you're growing up, could you even imagine where life would take you? I imagine a birthday is kind of a time where you maybe, especially a milestone birthday like 95 is one where maybe you think a little bit about, think back on everything you've done, everything you've accomplished, everything the world has shown you. I mean, could you have imagined everything you've done and seen at this point?
Well, it was kind of interesting that you mentioned that, because my daughter was here this morning for quite a while. We were talking about all the things that we possess today that we did not possess,
sure,
when we were growing up. And we run out of time and lists of things that we have today that we don't have. Just simple things like plastic, and how did we ever do without all the gadgets that we got today and all the possessions that we have that we grew up without. And it's interesting to have lived this long to have seen all of that transpire, and to go through all those phases. And there's some things I never have caught up to. I haven't caught up to all the modern technology and these cell phones and all the electronic things that we have today. It's leaving me a little bit behind now.
How did we live in a world without podcasts, Bud?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how we did, but we did.
We did it. We survived. Well, part of that journey was you became a head coach at age 29, I believe, is when you took that first job. That's we talk about coaches being pretty young these days when they get hired. That's extremely young. When you kind of think back on that, trying to
changing of the guard from being a player to then being a coach. How did that work for you? How to kind of adapt quickly to being in charge at such a young age?
Well, it was kind of a surprise to me too, because I'd gone from I'd played with Philadelphia and I went to Winnipeg and I was playing, and I was in the peak of my career as a player. And matter of fact, I was at an all-star game. In those days, they had a game called the Shriners had a game after the season where they played the Eastern Canadians against the Western Canadian Football League, and we played a Shriners charity game.
Okay.
I was invited to play in the game, and I'd gone out there and had a good game, scored a couple of touchdowns, and at the peak of my career. Well, just prior to my leaving, or prior to going to the game, let's put it that way, I got a phone call from the secretary or one of the executives secretary at Winnipeg, and saying, on your way back from Vancouver to Minneapolis, we'd like you to stop at the Viking or at the Blue Bomber office.
Sure.
I said, well, what's this about? Well, I can't say it right now, but if you stop here, we'd like to talk to you about a couple of things. Well, my first thing, I've been traded.
Right.
Or, I've been cut or traded or whatever. I couldn't imagine what that would have been. But anyway, there's a couple of side stories here. One of which was on the airplane that we flew to Vancouver on. There's half a dozen of us from Winnipeg played in the All-Star game, and we were scheduled to come back on the next night after the night game that was played that Saturday night. We weren't coming back till the next Sunday night. Well, it's been a long season. I was anxious to get home, and I looked at my ticket. I said, God, I got to spend a whole day in Vancouver waiting for the evening flight. So as we were leaving the airplane, going through the airport, I stopped at the ticket counter, and I said to the lady, I said, can I get on an earlier flight? Is there an earlier flight? She said, yes, there's one at 7 in the morning. I said, well, can you put me on that flight after 7 in the morning from the night before game? And she said, well, there's a flight, but it's full. And I said, well, no. She said, yeah. I said, well, is there a wait list? Well, we can put you on it. And I said, well,
right.
Here's put all of us on it. And we're all anxious to get home, and here's my number, and that's where I'm staying.
Yep.
We went practice for 3 days, we're going to play the game, and I'm walking out of my hotel room, and the phone rings. We're going to go down to get on the bus to go to the game. Air Canada, we can get you on that flight, early morning flight tomorrow morning. I said, fine, put us all on. I said, do you have room for any more of us? She said, yes, we can accommodate your whole party. So put us all on. Okay. So I go back. I tell the guys on the bus, well, we're scheduled to change. We're going to leave at 7 in the morning. Everybody's happy about that. And we're going back to Winnipeg. Well, we play the game. And next morning we get up and get on the bus. We're going to go to the airport. And one of the guys wasn't there, a guy named Cal Jones from Iowa. And I said, I called him up. I said, Cal, we're waiting on the bus for you. So I got a headache, had too much beer last night. He said, put me on that later flight, and I'll catch that this evening. Okay. So we get on the plane, and now I'm thinking, well, now what's going to happen when I get back to Winnipeg?
Right.
Go back that night, and the next morning, or that night, late that night, I get a call that the flight that we were on that night that we just prior to the game, they changed the date or changed the schedule. That plane took off, hit a mountain, and everybody got killed.
Wow.
And Cal Jones, this friend of mine, who played for Iowa, he was on that airplane. And if I hadn't have picked up that phone just before I left that room to get on the bus, we wouldn't be talking today. So
I mean, I feel like I've heard that story before, but it's been a while. When something like that happens, how often do you think about that?
Well, I don't because I've had so much happiness and success in my life that I don't think about those things that could have happened. But now to answer your original question and get back to Winnipeg. And they go in the morning, and of course, that's the main conversation. The plane hit the mountain, and everybody got killed. But their question to me was, they had fired Ali Sherman, the coach, while I was in Vancouver.
Okay.
Playing the game. And now they wanted to know if I was interested in coaching. Well, first of all, it was a big relief. At least I wasn't released.
Right.
So I said, I hadn't thought. I'm peak of my career. Why would I want to coach? Well, they went through the details and offered me a 2-year contract and blah, blah, blah. And finally, I said, well, if I do come back, that's only for 1 year. Because if I don't like coaching, then I can still play. Well, they were fine with that. So anyway, I took some soul searching whether I wanted to give up playing and go into coaching, and eventually, logically thought, well, I can't play forever, but I maybe can coach a little bit longer. So that's when I went home, talked to my wife, and got over the tragedy of the plane crash, and then a week later, then I signed with Winnipeg.
That's amazing. Did you? I mean, something happening, becoming a coach so suddenly like that. Did you have an idea of what kind of coach you wanted to be, or did that just kind of evolve as you?
It was the farthest thing from my mind. I had to retool my mind from a player, and tomorrow and next year and a family and all to coaching, which meant that I had to move to Winnipeg.
Sure.
I was living in Minneapolis and playing up there for 6 months and got back. But now I had a family, had to move my family from here to Winnipeg and live in Winnipeg year-round. Well, I could do that probably because I was from this part of the country, out Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, years ago, you talk to somebody in Texas, and you'd say Canada, and they'd say, which direction is that?
Right.
But I at least knew something about the Midwest and Canada, and I enjoyed the outdoors and the people, and I'd been there for 4 years, so I knew what I was getting into. It wasn't I just going to a new area. I'd lived there, so it all came together in about a week. I decided that was, a time to take the next step, if that's what I wanted to do, which I did not know at that time that that's what I would want to do. But it turned out it was, so being in the right place at the right time or the wrong place, they're both incidents. Not being on the airplane and being in Winnipeg, it all came together in about a week.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
That's amazing. And eventually, of course, you had tons of success there. I believe you coached 4 Grey Cup champions there. You get hired by the Vikings then, and you come here and you have all kinds of success as well. I mean, what was that transition like, jumping from the CFL to the NFL? And I mean, it's a very broad question, but I mean, as you think back on your Vikings coaching career, what do you think about the most? I imagine we all fixate on wins, losses, big games. What do you think of the most when you think about your coaching time here?
Well, I had been in the National Football League. I played with Philadelphia for 2 years. I'd played in Canada for 4 years, so I had an experience in both, areas and both countries. In addition to that, I'd played 2 years of pro basketball, so I had another perspective. And I was a baseball player. I played, a lot of town ball, so I had all the, the so-called experiences in the athletic world to, help me, find some direction. But it was not something that I'd set out to do, but it just kind of evolved, and it turned out that I was at the right place at the right time.
Right. That means you think back, do you have favorite players, favorite memories as you think about your time as a Vikings coach?
Too many. I've written 3 books.
Yes, I know that.
Some about sports, some about family, and experiences. And I can only say that all my life's experiences, whether we're talking about my adolescence or my family and getting married, and all, I've had nothing but good experiences. And the secret, the point there is that if you've had a lifetime of good experiences, it sustains you in your later life because you have a lot to look back on and a lot to rely on. And if I haven't had any major traumas, I've had close calls like the airplane and other experiences like that. But other than that, all my family has all turned out well. They've all been, when we first got married, it was, well, what were we? Well, we didn't have a long range plan, but it'd be great if we had a family and all the kids went to school and all this. Well, we had 6 children. They all graduated from college. No student debts. They all had great, families. So I got grandchildren. So all my life's experiences have been good, and I think that sustains you in, later life probably. But it also, I think, health-wise, it helps also because mentally, my mind is not cluttered with a lot of, catastrophes or disasters or, bad experiences. I've got all good experiences, and that sustains you.
Absolutely. Now, you were at, I believe, the introduction of the new Vikings coach, Kevin O'Connell. That was a little while ago, maybe a month or 2 ago. At this point, people have made comparisons, I don't know if it's appearance-wise or demeanor-wise, between a younger Bud Grant and the current head coach, Kevin O'Connell. Do you see that? And what did you think when you met Kevin O'Connell, and what do you think of what you've seen so far?
Well, that's an interesting question because I met Kevin and we were talking. We had lunch at the office one day, just nothing official, just chatting, and it was interesting. We were comparing, our stages of a career. Now, I'm 95, and what is he, 33 or whatever it is? Anyway, he's already made a number of stops.
Sure.
He's been at other places. He's had kids raised and born in other towns and everything. And so there's a great deal of difference now in terms of assistant coaches. For just as an example, when I came here, I got 4 assistants.
They got 4 assistants coaching the linebackers now.
Yeah, and I had 4 because I was allowed 6, but I saved one spot because Bernsey was at Green Bay and he couldn't get out of that till a year, so I saved a spot for him, and I had another spot open that I had somebody else in mind. So I hired Jocko Nelson from Gustavus, who's a friend of mine. So anyway, I had 4 assistants my first year. You know how many they got now?
They got like 30, don't they? Something like that?
Well, between 20 and 22 or 24.
That's amazing.
Directly assistant coaches. Yeah. That doesn't account for what they call, what do they call it? Administrative assistant.
Yeah, quality control, whatever. Yeah,
handles all your bookwork,
right.
All your correspondence and things outside of on the field stuff. So you got administrative assistants plus 24 coaches. I mean, so you ask the question, what's the difference? Well, there's a lot of difference. And I was talking to Kevin, like, well, how do you, set up where do you meet and what do you talk about? And, I mean, every coach there is not, they got an assignment of some kind, and how do you share all that information, and who makes the final decisions and all of that? So it's a little different, and you can't. It's not fair to try to compare what it was like then and now.
No,
and that's not a. It's a different ball game, and it's not. The comparisons are not valid.
The culture of collaboration. Did you do a lot of collaboration back in your day, or did you was your word final?
Well, one of the things that when I came down from Winnipeg, I said I want. Jim Finks was a very great, good friend and a general manager, and we had good help. But I said the final decisions will be mine. It will not be based on salary or personalities or, whatever. I said, all decisions, personnel-wise, will be mine. You decide how to sell the tickets, and you decide the salaries. But when it gets down to who, what, and that'll be my decisions. That was the only really direction I had for them was, I will make the decision. We got scouts, we had a couple of scouts, but when it writes down to it, a committee of one, I found out, was a lot more efficient than the committee of 20.
You're probably right about that. Well, it worked to great effect, obviously, getting to 4 Super Bowls. Bud, enjoying this chat. I want to ask you a couple more things, then I'll let you get on with.
Hey, I'm retired. I got all the time in the world.
You do. You're right. You've told me that. That's right. You've got. Well, I was going to ask you what aside from talking to me on this podcast, and obviously probably spending time with your children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. What keeps you busy these days? What does Bud Grant like to do on a typical day?
Well, being retired, I have, as I mentioned, all my kids have had great, educations and made great decisions on their mates and produced kids and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they're all right here. So that occupies not my time, but at least my interests.
Sure.
And I have a place in Wisconsin. I run a family resort.
Okay.
They come and go, on schedules that I have, and when I say that, that's facetious because I don't do anything. They do all the work and the cooking and the boats and the docks and the fishing and all that. But I'm the manager of that family resort kind of a deal. So you ask the question, what do I do to keep busy? Make sure there's plenty of groceries, and plenty of minnows and worms, and the fishing lines are all strung up. That's my major concern.
You get out there still and throw the line in the water and get out in the field still and hunt, or are you still?
All the time.
Good.
You ask what I do. That's what I do.
I know.
I mean, my mobility isn't what it used to be. At 95, I can't wade through streams and climb mountains and do all that kind of stuff. But I can still, I can drive a car and get out there and I can go. And there's a difference between there's kind of a misterm because you say hunting. Mm-hmm. Hunting kind of means you seek,
sure,
you go and look. But there's another side to hunting. You hunt things and they come to me. For example, I can put out some decoys and the ducks come to me.
Yes.
And I shoot at them. Or I can call a turkey and the turkey comes to me. Or I go through and sit in the deer blind and the deer come to me. Now, is that hunting?
I don't know. I think it is. It still is. It's work smarter, not harder.
I know, but
work smarter, not harder.
The word is deceiving because
yes.
Hunting does not mean hunting. Doesn't mean seeking. And I'm not sure if I'm sitting in a duck blind and the ducks come to me that I'm hunting them. Maybe they're hunting me. I don't know.
Maybe they got plans for you. Well,
but in answer to your question, I get out and do a lot. Not a lot, not as much as I used to. But I got kids. I was for example, 2 years ago, I was with my grandson. He shot his first deer.
Nice.
He's 13 years old. Well, I got a bigger kick out of that than if I'd have shot the deer.
Sure.
So that parlays itself into boys and girls. It'd be that the pageants and other things. No, I'm not what you would call I mean, I don't live vicariously through my kids or my grandkids.
Yeah.
They can seek their own level and all that. I don't go to all the little league games. There are too many to go on. But I follow them. I know what they're doing. I talk to them all the time. So that occupies a lot of my time.
I'm sure it does. Any special thing you're doing for your birthday, or any special, any wishes for this next trip around the sun to get to 96? Anything you want to do this year?
Well, I like the same old.
Yeah.
What I've been doing, apparently it works, and having a family around you, I think, is sustaining. And if you've got good memories, you can entertain yourself. In other words, I can sit here and you can say, well, what about this or that or the other? Well, I maybe can go back, and my memory is not as good as it once was, but I can remember a lot of things and a lot of games and a lot of incidents that happened in my life that are entertaining. I can replay them, and we can either just through my mind or through company and get by that way. But on the other side of that is what I learned in coaching is you got to have a short memory.
Right.
In other words, you can't go and lose a game and then be despondent over a period of time. You got to get over it. Have a short memory, go on. Or the same applies if you win. You got to have a short memory, because you can't think, well, now you got to figure it out. Now I must become kind of a genius, because that game will be replaced, or that experience, by something else next week, next month, next year. So a short memory is very important, that you don't think you're as good, better than you are, or as bad as you are.
Well, Bud, sounds like it's been working for you for 95 years almost and counting. So happy birthday, and thank you so much for all the time you've given me today, all the wisdom you've given to the listeners, and enjoy the special day, and enjoy everything this life has brought to you.
It's a busy couple of days, because every year that's kind of they surprise me with something on a birthday week, and so I'm sure it's going to be an enjoyable time, and I'm very lucky and fortunate and thankful. And thanks for your call.
You bet. Take care, Bud. Appreciate it.
You bet. Goodbye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it with Bud Grant. Just a wonderful perspectives on life, on, just the chances we take, the chances we have, how his life basically changed completely in that 1 week span where could have died. He easily could have died if he had gotten on that airplane instead of changing his flight. And then, a week or two later, takes the job to be the head coach, even though he's in the middle of his playing career, and, has great success at that, and it ends up being a Vikings head coach and then a Hall of Famer. That changed the trajectory of his life. You never know when those moments are going to come. You never know what that is going to lead to in your life, but that is some good message from Bud Grant, along with several other things. So, again, happy birthday to Bud, and many, many more. Now, I asked Bud about Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach, the new head coach, and he was there for the introduction of the new coach. Vikings just wrapped up minicamp here. You can find a lot more coverage of that on StarTribune.com, and on the Access Vikings podcast, did one of those earlier this week. I believe that went live on Thursday, so go give that a listen as well. Got to get to the Lynx here quick. They lost to Las Vegas, but a good showing. Again, Ariel Powers had her best game of the season, which is a big deal for them, 25 points. She asked Michael Jordan for advice. That's a good person to ask for advice. So even though the Lynx lose that game, fall to 1-5, they look much better the last 2-3 games as opposed to the first 3 games of the season. Just a real tough slate at the beginning of the season. Once that eases up a little bit, they should be in much better shape. So we'll see how that plays out as the year goes along. Let's finish with the cooler. Speaking of coaching, like we spent so much time with Bud Grant, I don't know if Bud would ever get into a feud of the epic proportions as Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban. That has been an amazing story. Saban accusing Texas A&M of buying all their players essentially through these name, image, and likeness deals, and Jimbo Fisher firing back, head coach of Texas A&M, firing back at an impromptu news conference on Thursday to fight back against Nick Saban. He had some amazing quotes, said, "It's despicable that a reputable head coach can come out and say this when he doesn't get his way or things don't go his way. The narcissist in him doesn't allow those things to happen. It's ridiculous when he's not on top." A little later on, got a little cryptic. He said, "Some people think they're God. Go dig into how God did his deal. You may find out about a guy a lot of things you don't want to know. We build him up to be the czar of football. Go dig into his past or anybody who's ever coached with him. You can find out anything you want to find out, what he does and how he does it. There's a reason I ain't went back and worked for him with opportunities. I don't want to be associated with him." Well, SEC will have its meetings in a couple weeks. The coaches will cross paths. Fisher actually said that Saban tried to call him. He did not take his call. This is amazing. This is going to be quite the escalation of this rivalry as we consider this. So that is something to consider as this college season only heats up. That will do it for today and the week. Hope you enjoyed everything on the podcast this week. Give me a shout at Randball on Twitter. Send me an email. Love to hear your thoughts on today's Bud Grant interview and anything else that's on your mind. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you again on Monday.